Hey, y'all. So we're going to be talking about Candace Owens today. Very controversial conservative figure. Used to work for the Daily Wire, worked under Ben Shapiro for a while. They had a falling out, an argument, and then now she does her own thing. She has a very interesting view on Israel and on the Jewish people. She said some very controversial things that's gotten her into some hot water, and I think she's sticking to her guns. So we are here today to talk about this, and I'm actually going to be delivering a philosophical argument about what I think that Candace Owens is getting wrong about Israel and why I think she's got a distortion in her viewpoint. But at the end of this video, I'm also going to tell you what I think she's getting right. So I want to do a deep dive into some context here, some historical, some theological, because Candace Owens claims to be Christian. She converted from Protestantism, if I can say that word correctly, to Catholicism. So she believes the Christian faith, and that's what she publicly claims. So because of that, I'm going to be coming at this argument from that perspective, the perspective of, well, here's the basis of her own faith in what she said that she believes. So Candace, if you watch this video and I misrepresent or Doug misrepresents one of your beliefs, one of your viewpoints, or one of the things you've actually said or done, please correct us. We would appreciate that because we don't want to be on here delivering false information or making false accusations. And also, we do not view this as an attack, so please don't accept it that way. We're not here to attack you. We're here to hopefully bring some constructive criticism, and that be that. So this is what I think. There could be a little bit of a personal issue happening with Candace Owens and Israel. I am not going to, this is all speculation and supposition, so I'm not going to jump into the details there. But she did work for Ben Shapiro. He's a successful Jew at the Daily Wire. She initially was critical of President Donald Trump and the Republican Party. So there is that. I don't know if any of that plays into this. She may have felt because of the situation she was in that she had to have a certain angle or viewpoint or perspective in order to have a platform to express her views. Obviously, she has her own platform now. So there may be some of that, that's conjecture. Okay. So I'm just going to put that out there and kind of it's beside the point. But she does claim to be Christian. Obviously, she converted to Catholicism. Christianity has its roots in Judaism. So specifically, the God of Christianity is the same God of Judaism. So you have the Torah, you have some of the Jewish texts, you got the Talmud, you've got different things. I'm going to probably reference more so the Torah today and the Bible because the Bible includes the Torah, but the Talmud does not include all the things. The Bible and Talmud are not the same. So some people would argue and say the God of Islam is the same God as Christianity, right? Or Judaism. But I would push back against that. And I'm just going to let you know where I'm coming from today and say it's not the same God. And the reason is because if you actually compare, if you read the two, if you read either the Bible or the Torah, or on the other side, the Quran, and you compare the two gods in these two historical books, I would say the characteristics are very different. And the decrees coming from the divine being in these books are very different. So I would say we're dealing with two different divine beings here. But Christianity has its roots in Judaism, and obviously Jesus Christ, who began Christianity, was a Jew. So there we go. Christian tradition. Many Christians, particularly in the Western countries, have historically supported Israel. So you've got something that is based in theological support. A lot of times it's called Zionism. Or Christians lean towards biblical prophecy and they support Israel for those reasons. So many Christians, especially in the U.S., support Israel due to something called dispensationalism. It's dispensationalist theology. And essentially it supposes that the return of the Jews in 1948 to Israel fulfilled a biblical prophecy. And they would point to prophecies in Ezekiel and Isaiah in the Old Testament. They also believe that this is a precursor to the second coming of Jesus Christ. So that's how it ties in with the Christian faith and potentially the future. And then the establishment of Israel in 1948 was also seen by many Christians as a divine fulfillment of these prophecies. That's what I just stated. Key biblical passages such as Genesis 12:3 are oftentimes used by not just dispensationalists, but also Christians in general who support Israel. It says, I will bless those who bless you, talking about Abraham's descendants. And so they often cite this as a mandate to support Israel. So I'm going to let you know, I would put myself into that category to an extent. So let y'all know where I'm personally coming from today, just so you understand the bias that's happening and all that. But at the same time, you're going to see a little bit of pushback from myself at the end of this video. So Historical context: post-World War II, Christian support for Israel grew due to what many consider guilt over the Holocaust, and a lot of people would consider sympathy for the Jewish suffering that took place during that time. And many people believed a Jewish homeland was becoming a moral necessity. So obviously there was a lot of international support, especially from the United States, for that to take place. And then a couple other events. One, I'm just going to mention one. Since then, during the Cold War, the U.S. viewed Israel as a democratic ally against Soviet-backed Arab states. So there's been some other political and war-related events since World War II that have caused the United States, especially for political reasons, to back Israel or to join forces with Israel. But we're not going to get into all that. Denominational variations. Okay, so I'm making this philosophical argument from the perspective that Candace Owens claims to be a Christian. So let me give a little bit, and I'm not saying that she's not. Okay, I'm not here to argue that point. I'm just saying that's what she publicly states. So let me give you a little bit of the history here. Evangelicals are the strongest supporters traditionally, especially in the U.S., of Israel, where 80% of white evangelicals, and I say of Israel, and I'm talking about from the Christian perspective, right? Obviously, there's a lot of other people that support Israel, especially Jewish people of Jewish heritage. Okay. 80% of white evangelicals view Israel favorably, and this was a 2020 research that was a study that was done, and obviously that could have shifted. That's been 5 years, so it could have shifted since then. But evangelicals often align with pro-Israel policies, including recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital. Then there's mainline Protestants, and these are denominations such as the Presbyterians, the Methodists. A lot of times they are a little bit slightly more cautious. They support Israel traditionally, but they've also criticized some of its policies towards the Palestinians. And then you've got the Catholics, and that's one step down. Again, they're a lot more cautious. And although they do have recognized traditionally Israel's right to exist as a state or as a nation, the Catholic Church also emphasizes Palestinian rights and peace. And some popes, like John Paul II and Pope Francis, called for a two-state solution. And then you've got Orthodox Christians who their support varies by region. It really depends on where they live in the world and what cultural influences are around them. You see a lot of different directions that they go when it comes to Israel. There are critics, there are exceptions in the Christian community, and some of those are liberation theology, and it frames Palestinians as oppressed people, and they cite biblical justice for their support of the Palestinians. And then there's replacement theology. Replacement theology is a little bit more, I would say, in the conservative side of the Christian church, a little bit more widespread. Liberation theology probably comes more from the liberal side. And that's just me, based on the information I know, making a guesstimation. But replacement theology argues that the Christian church replaced Israel as God's chosen people. So they were God's chosen people, and then replacement theology says now all the Christians who have accepted Jesus, and this is obviously breaking away from Judaism and is going into the Christian faith and saying now they are what the Christian Bible calls Israel, and it's more of a spiritual Israel. And so we're going to get into that a little bit later. I think that might play in. But obviously that reduces theological support for a Jewish state for those that believe replacement theology. Younger evangelicals also are showing a growing sympathy for Palestinians, reflecting a generational shift potentially. So what has Candace Owens said? Doug, you got any remarks to make so far, or am I good to keep going?
You're good to keep going. I was just thinking, what my thoughts all lie in Candace Owens' position and such, because otherwise it would be too large of a conversation, I think, for this morning segment.
Right. Obviously, there could be pushback, and we could get into the details of each one of these points. This is my best attempt at summarizing a lot of these, for those that don't have some of the context here, a lot of the details. But what has Candace Owens said? She's made several controversial statements about Israel, particularly since October 7th, 2023, when Hamas attacked Israel. Some of the things she said, she's criticized Israel's actions in Gaza. She repeatedly criticized their military response to Hamas's attack, describing it as genocide against Palestinians. So she's claimed segregation in Jerusalem, claiming that Muslims are forced to live in a certain sector of Jerusalem. She did this while Amy Kozak was on her show, and then Kozak actually pushed back and said, well, no, that's actually not true, and corrected her, saying that, it's not the same thing as segregation in the American South that we saw historically, but rather that the segregation happens culturally instead of like something that they're not forced to do, right? So also she's talked about a lot of theories involving Israel, many that some people would consider conspiracy theories. I'm not going to get into whether these theories are true or not today, because to be honest, I haven't done the research. A lot of people are very, very critical of some of these. I'm just going to go through a couple of them just so you kind of know what I'm talking about. She suggested that Israel was involved in the 9/11 attacks. She's claimed that they potentially American Israel Public Affairs Committee was behind the Kennedy assassination. She's alleged that a sinister Jewish gang in Hollywood is responsible for horrific acts, and a small ring of Jewish people in Hollywood and Washington is involved in quite sinister activities. Now, here's the thing. I know some of these, it's like, okay, well, somebody was behind all these things, right? You know, there was somebody behind each one of these things. We know Hollywood's messed up. We know crazy stuff is happening. So I think in some of these cases, it's just the question of whether it was Jewish people involved, and or not, essentially. But she stated that Israel was founded by a cult who performed ritual murders and crimes against Christians during Passover. She claimed that Joseph Stalin was Jewish and part of a Jewish political faction. She's asserted that the Anti-Defamation League was founded to protect a Jewish pedophile. Not going to get into that, but she's also accused of downplaying the Holocaust. Now, she has not said that she has not denied the Holocaust, okay? But she has suggested, she has had people on that have denied the Holocaust and supported people that are Holocaust deniers. There is that. But I will be fair. She's also suggested that the Auschwitz concentration camp's website engages in Holocaust denial. So I think she has pushed back from the opposite side as well. So I think there is some evidence there that she's not a Holocaust denier. So I will say that and try to be fair. But although she has supported people that are. So there we go. She's also posted many inflammatory remarks on X having to do with Israel. So I'm just going to read a couple of the summaries. She said that Israel funds and arms ISIS and Al-Qaeda to take the land after conflicts. She said that U.S. foreign policy is dictated by Israel and that America is a colony of Israel. She's mockingly urged white American men to sign up and die in Iran for Netanyahu or to be labeled anti-Semitic. We're going to get into her reasons for that in a little bit. But she's also said that Israel has a bloodlust like no other, and she's accused them of imperialism. She's defended some anti-Semitic figures and some rhetoric. She's defended Kanye West's anti-Semitic comments, which those, we don't need to get into that, but it's pretty clear that that's what he was doing. She's expressed support for Nick Fuentes, who obviously is a Holocaust denier. So here's where we land, is that she's gotten a lot of criticism from a lot of different people, right? She's been called anti-Semitic, but though she's denied that. So in my mind, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to give her the benefit of the doubt. And if she says she's not anti-Semitic and that's not where these criticisms are coming from, I'm going to say, hey, I believe her. Okay. I'm going to believe, give her the benefit of the doubt until there's evidence, somebody is innocent until proven guilty. Right. So if it's not that, right, then the big question is, okay, Candace, where are all these criticisms coming from? And it seems like with everything that she said, to me, it seems like she's crossed a line from just being critical or, trying to be constructively critical to having either a bias or a bent or even a personal vendetta of some sort. That's how it feels. I'm just going to say that's a feeling, but that's obviously not solid evidence. She's also suggested that fear of being labeled anti-Semitic prevents criticism of Israel. So I think this could be where a lot of this comes from. It could be that she's felt the fear, she's felt the pressure and maybe even manipulation from people over her, former bosses or whatever, or people in her sphere, and that she's tried to be a little bit critical, or she's tried to say things, well, this is black and white, and I'm just going to say it, and then that hasn't been well received, and she's maybe gotten pushback, maybe been threatened. I have no idea. It could be that she's trying to break out of this mold and say, hey, that's not okay. And, but obviously it's led to a pattern of escalating criticism against Israel. So not exactly sure where she stands in her own mind, but she's claimed not to be anti-Semitic. Okay. So here's two things. I'm going to let Doug, I'm going to stop there, let you share anything you want to share. And then I'm going to say, these are the two things it seems like she potentially believes, and then I'm going to give my argument, my philosophical argument.
Okay. Well, first of all, I think that it's very important to define anti-Semitism. And I'm not sure that I am the professional who needs to be doing that definition or, talking about it. But I think that it is, number one, way too easy to just throw that label around. But then number two, we have to look at a person's actual actions and consider that oftentimes when we're pulling statements from people, we might not be fully understanding everything that's backed up behind it. And I'm going to use the Kanye West thing as an example, and I don't want to dive too much into this, but I saw that one in particular. She kind of, I guess, put her stamp of approval on what Kanye said. And what Kanye said, we have to remember this is coming from a guy who has clearly mental disturbances, right?
Right.
And he has also a lot of experience, and some of that experience is valid. Some of it is not. And there's no way to know what is what on that front. What I can say is that there are a lot of evil people in his industry, and he probably has an experience with a certain kind of that people in that industry. And he's talking about those people specifically. And so when Candace Owens says something like, I believe him, it doesn't mean she's anti-Semitic all of a sudden. It just means that he has an experience and she believes that his experience is true to a degree. I think that where we get into trouble is when we start just throwing labels on people and calling them crazy and disregarding everything else that they have experienced or said just because they said something that made us uncomfortable. And we need to be very careful with that. And I also wanted to ask you about, you said, and you had a little bit of a list of the things that you can tell that she believes. You said something about Israel being founded as a cult. I wanted to reach back to that and see what that was, because that one threw me off. But I was trying to type it out and I couldn't remember exactly what you said.
Yeah, it was. I don't have all the details, but essentially the theory is that Israel in 1948, the state of Israel, or like the current country of Israel, was founded by a cult who performed ritual murders. And this got into like the pedophile thing as well, unfortunately. So
okay.
Sorry for some of the language we're using today. It's hard to avoid it with some of these, some of the things that we're talking about. But yeah, they performed ritual murders and crimes against Christians during Passover. So it's essentially pointing back to, and I'm not going to, I think some people probably know the names that I'm talking about and all that kind of stuff. But yeah.
I think that my position is so weird. I'm the kind of person who likes to see things from both sides of the table, and so I think that there are some things that she has said and claimed that have an element of truth to them, but perhaps some of the words that she's chosen to use to describe them are extreme, such as Israel was founded on it. Like, if that was a word that she indeed did use, maybe there's some truth to the history that she might have referenced, but the way that she presents it can be a little bit extreme. But sometimes I wonder if that is actually just a tactic to make sure that people are hearing what she's saying, because sometimes if you just say things literally and you don't dramatize them, people ignore you and they don't really dig deep. So maybe there's a tactic there. I don't know. But I think that regardless of the sensational ways that she has said some things, it is important to look at specifically what she has said and what she has supported, instead of assuming some sort of emotional translation of it. And I think that unfortunately, most people right now are doing that to her. They're looking at what she has said and they're jumping to conclusions, and they're creating the straw man argument saying, well, look at Candace Owens. She said and did all these things, when actually she didn't really say and do those things. You just understood it that way. And I'm not saying she's doing that across the board. There are some things that she has said that I do think, it is what it is, and they're dramatic. But I think most of what I have seen has been not that she's just been a little bit dramatic. That's all.
Yeah, I think you raised a few good points. Number one being, this list of theories that I went through that some would consider conspiracy theories. It probably depends on who you talk about, which ones they consider, true, which ones they consider false. It's like a lot of these things, we know that evil people exist, and they exist in every culture, and there's people behind the scenes. Right. There's no culture where there's no evil people behind the scenes doing, not doing anything evil. So
every government is corrupt because every government is run by humans who are corrupt.
Right. Exactly. So there could be a lot of truth to some of the things she's saying, and I 100% agree with that. But at the same time, I think it's a general And, and this is where I could get into sticky waters, because I like what you're saying. The other pushback as well is like, well, don't make assumptions. And so that's what I'm trying not to do today. But unfortunately, I have made some based on listening to her and the way she talks about Israel and some of the things that are going on there. So I have made some assumptions, and my pushback against myself today would be, Candace, if you watch this video and you want to respond to it and you want to correct me, feel free. You want to say, hey, I don't believe that, and you want to lay out the truth about it. But so I want to bring this philosophical argument, because this is the argument that I believe a lot of her actions and words seem to show. And now here's the assumptions I'm making. Now that you've said we shouldn't make assumptions, Doug. So thank you for setting me up so well.
I'm sorry. Well, I mean, if you made it clear though that you're saying these seem to show. That's what I'm saying. Like, just transparency. What it appears
they seem to show. And here, I think that's a good point, and it's a good way to frame this. Number one, what she says in her criticism seems to show, number one, she either believes that the Bible, because she claims to be a Christian and believes the Bible is God's word, she either believes the Bible, when it says we should support Israel, is speaking about a spiritual Israel. So speaking about the Christian church, replacement theology, essentially, and how now we support Christians, and that it seems to be the way she goes, right? Or she believes that modern Israel isn't the Israel of the Bible. So that what you see is not what used to be, essentially, and that there's no reason to support them now. There's no reason to consider anything from Scripture having any weight on modern day Israel. Okay, so here's my philosophical argument as to why I believe neither of those things play into it, why we should support Israel as Christians who believe the Bible. Now, if you're watching this and you're a secularist, you're a humanist, you're an atheist, you're an agnostic, or some other religion, you don't believe in the Christian Bible, this philosophical argument is not going to bear weight on you personally, but it should still make sense within the context of what I've shared today. So within the context of Candace Owens being a Christian, this philosophical argument should make sense. So this is Numbers 6:27. So this is scripture now. Okay. When it says, whenever Aaron and his sons bless the people of Israel in my name, this is God speaking to the children of Israel in the Bible. He says, I myself will bless them. Here's another translation. So they shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. So there's this pattern of scripture that God, it's not just about Israel. It's about the fact that God has placed his name on Israel. So if you can view it from that perspective of Israel is a representation, for lack of a better word, and an ambassador of God's kingdom on the earth. Okay, and it bears his name. Now, I believe the Christian church does as well. But look at this, Israel 43:10. It says, you are my witnesses, declares the Lord, and my servant whom I have chosen. Talking about Israel. You are my witnesses, declares the Lord. But look, it gets even more specific. 33:4. So some people would say, well, the modern day Israel, that's still, they would still argue the modern day Israel doesn't fall into that category, right? But look at this, 2 Chronicles 33:4. In the house of the Lord, of which the Lord has said, my name shall be in Jerusalem forever. In the house of the Lord, talking about the temple, of which the Lord has said, my name shall be in Jerusalem forever. Verse 7, 2 Chronicles 33. In the house of God, of which God has said to David and his son Solomon, in this house and in Jerusalem, which I have chosen from all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. So to me, I'm just interpreting this verse to the best of my ability. It seems like what God is saying is, hey, his name is on not just the lineage of the Jewish nation, and that could be represented by the house. The house could be the physical temple, but in the house of God, which God said to David and his son Solomon, in this house could also represent the people of Israel right there. And in Jerusalem, which is a physical location, the city, the capital of Israel, which I have chosen from all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. So I believe he's talking about two different things here. So obviously talking about the tribes of Israel, talking about the people. So this is my philosophical argument, Doug. So you feel free to push back, and I'm going to get into like a little bit of like the New Testament too, if we want to do that. But God has put his name; he's chosen from the Bible. If that's the way you if you interpret this verse, that God has put his name upon this nation, and not just the nation, not just the people, but the location as well. And so think about Trump Tower for a second. And I know Candace Owens has been critical of Trump, so I'm not doing this to infuriate her if she's watching this, or her followers, but I think it's a good illustration. Trump does not run everything that happens in Trump Tower. He doesn't do the janitorial service. He doesn't open, he doesn't stand at the doors. He doesn't clean. He doesn't, it's like, he doesn't manage it. He's not there, but his name is on the tower.
Yeah.
And so when the people came to protest and they parked themselves, 100 people in Trump Tower, and they got arrested, right? Who were they protesting? They weren't protesting the tower. They were protesting Trump.
Right.
Why? Because the tower was a representation of him, and his name was on the tower. And so that is the picture, is whether she wants to admit it or not, the God of the Bible and of the Israelites has placed his name upon not just the people, not just the Jews, but also Jerusalem itself, the location itself, and the scripture says forever. So let me any pushback against that or any thoughts there, and then I want to show how this is connected to also the Christian faith, not just Judaism as well.
I don't have a lot of pushback, but I just do have a different angle that I don't think people are really considering. I think that number one, you're right, and number two, she'd agree with you. What's happening right now is nobody's giving her that chance, and nobody's asking her that question. Nobody's really pinning her down on that specifically. What they're doing is either, one, just siding with the extreme dramatic version that people are upset about, or two, calling her an anti-Semite. And when you have people coming at you like that, you have a tendency to just respond in kind. And I think that nobody is actually just sitting her down or, with her on her show or anything and just saying like, hey, can we really just get to the bottom of like what you think about Israel and like the biblical history of everything? That's not happening. So she's not even, and I don't think she's thought to even express it that way, because she's getting attacked from so many sides. Either, like I said, one side, she's so supported that she's not being challenged, or the other side, she's so attacked that she's just in defense mode. And so she's not having that opportunity. But I think she would actually look at everything you just said and agree, at least to a large extent, with it. But that's speculation. I'm not sure of that. I would be very interested to see if she would or not.
Well, if she responds, we may get a chance to see if you're right or not. But I think that's a good response. That's a good point. I just want to bring this for those watching. This is not so much for Candace Owens so much, because I know she's probably aware, but for those watching, if there's anybody that's not aware, the Christian Bible also connects support for Israel from the Old Testament to the New to an extent. Okay. Romans 11, 1-5. It says, I say then, God has not rejected his people, has he? Far from it. Talking about the children of Israel, talking about the Jews. God has not rejected his people, has he? Far from it. For I too am an Israelite. And this is Paul the Apostle talking, a descendant of Abraham, the tribe of Benjamin. God has not rejected his people whom he foreknew. Or do you not know that what the scripture says in the passage about Elijah, how he pleads with God against Israel? Lord, they have killed your prophets, they have torn down your altars, and I alone am left, and they are seeking my life. There's a really good point to come out of that, and I'm gonna share in a second. But verse 4 says, but what is the divine response to him? I have kept for myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to Baal. In the same way, then, there has also come to be at the present time a remnant according to God's gracious choice. So Paul the Apostle is saying God has not rejected the Jewish people just because Christianity is now on the scene. And obviously, if there's Jews watching this who are not Messianic Jews, but we follow Judaism, you're going to disagree with me on that point, and this is not going to apply to you. But at the same time, just showing it from the perspective of the Christian faith, there is this continuation that happens when it comes to God's support for Israel. And then look at verse 28. In relation to the gospel, they are enemies on your account, talking about the Jews, but in relation to God's choice, and here's the caveat, or here's the side note. The Bible also clearly states in relation to the gospel, everybody's enemies on your account who are against the spreading of the gospel. So Paul's not saying the Jews are your enemies. He's talking about them specifically, but he's saying in relation to the gospel spreading, he's saying this is the most important thing. You need to go to the nations to spread the gospel. That's what he's saying. So he's not saying that they're enemies, but it says, but in relation to God's choice, they are beloved on account of the fathers. Okay, what in relation to God's choice, they are beloved on account of the fathers, for the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable. What's he talking about? He's saying the nation upon which God has put his name. That's what he's talking about. He's referencing the fact that God said, because of the fathers, those came before. Who were the fathers? We just read, and obviously all the heroes of the faith from the Old Testament, but it says whenever Aaron and his sons bless the people of Israel in my name, talking about the priests, right? They could be considered the fathers, but also when it says in 2 Chronicles 33, David and his son Solomon in this house and in Jerusalem, which I've chosen from all the tribes of Israel, I will put my name forever. So Paul the Apostle is obviously referencing the Old Testament fact and truth that God put his name upon not just the people of Israel, but Israel itself. And so there's my connection from the Old to the New. There's a lot of other verses that people could use, but I want to get into any thoughts, Doug, and I want to get into what I feel like Candace Owens has gotten right.
Okay. So let's harken back to the part of the scripture where you were talking about where Paul was talking about the difference, basically the two different camps in Israel. We have the camp who is for God and the camp who is for Baal, right? You can just break it down that simply. And take that concept and now expand it throughout history. And I posit to you that not a lot has changed. There are still people of God with God's name on them, Israelites specifically, who are for God. And then there are people who are for Baal. Whatever like name they call him now, it changes, right?
Yeah.
I think that what's happening is people like Candace Owens are focusing so much on the Baal worshipers, quote unquote, just to throw that label on them, that they're forgetting to mention the Yahweh worshipers, and they're forgetting to throw their support behind that. And that's the problem with focusing too much on the negative. You have to make sure that your actual focus is on God and your devotion to him. And yes, we want to expose the dark works because we're told to, like the Bible literally says to expose the dark works, but more than that's like very few verses you can find say to do that. So we should, but more verses are talking about how we need to be more focused on God himself and the fruit of the Spirit and all of that good stuff, right? So I think that what's happening with Candace is she's simply just very honed in on the evil part of this, which there is an evil part to this, but she's just not talking enough about the positive part, as far as I can tell. Hopefully that's wrong, but more maybe what it is, you know, the old saying where it's like you can say 10 positive things and one negative thing will ruin your day. Maybe it's that. I don't know, because I don't listen to her podcast every single day. Maybe she does talk more about all the positive things and she does focus more on God, and these few negative things that spring up are the ones that are running the headlines. That could be the case. I'm not sure. So it would be nice to hear from her if she could come out and just like say like, hey, listen, I do talk about like good things too, but I also just want to point out the bad. That's fair.
Yeah.
You know, so we'll see. I don't know.
I would hope that would be the case, but I think from what I've seen, which is, I'll be honest, it's not a lot. I'm not a constant listener of Candace Owens from what I've seen and from some of the things that I've read about her, because I did my research this week, obviously, is that it seems like she is completely focused on the negative, and that it's very rare to hear something positive from her. And I think that's what points back to maybe potentially there being a point of personal, it being a personal issue. There could have been a personal offense that happened at some point. There could have been something, but also it could just be that she's gone to the extreme, and she's pushed back against some of the negative experiences she's had and some of the manipulation or the control that's, people have placed on her, the pressures that have been placed against her. And maybe instead of pushing back in a balanced way, she's pushed back in an extreme way. So I want to share what I think she's gotten right, because I think you're raising a very good point when you talk about from that scripture, Romans, where it says Elijah pleaded with God against Israel, right? He pleads with God. He's like, what is Elijah doing? He's pointing out the fact that, hey, I'm following the God of the Bible, right? But there's all these people that claim to be, but they're not, right? And they're,
right.
So in the Old Testament, you see this, and in the Torah, you see this line of people that either, and once you break out of the Torah specifically, there's a line of kings, but obviously it's like even in the Torah, there's a line of people that were God's people that it was kind of a crapshoot whether or not they're going to actually follow God or not. It's like you got one generation that believes, one generation that doesn't, one generation that's obedient, one generation that's not. And then you got the kings, like evil king, evil king, evil king, good king, right. Evil king, good king. And so here's what I think she's gotten right, is that she has said, hey, we should be able to push back against the narrative, right? And so support for Israel should not look like I'm going to justify every single thing that they do as a nation, or especially not, I'm going to 100% justify and support every decision that someone like Netanyahu makes, because support for Israel looks very different than agreeing with 100% everything that Israel's leader, Israel's prime minister does. It's like that's a very different thing. Even historically speaking, if you were, let's put yourself into the biblical text for a little bit. If you were under an evil king in Israel, if you're under a good king supporting that nation of Israel, if you're an Israelite or a Jewish person, supporting it would be obeying the king and doing what he's asking you to do if he's a good king, right? But if he was an evil king, what would support look like? Well, criticizing, pushing back, trying to say, hey, you're doing the wrong thing. You're going to hurt Israel. Let's do the right thing, right? So
or
there
even
is a lot of
good
space.
king doing something evil.
Sorry.
Even a good king doing something evil, like Nathan and David. Like we should be able, and Nathan was very scared to go to David and say, hey, you messed up. But he did.
He did, yeah. But I'm sure he thought, I could get killed doing this. You know, but the right thing to do in that moment was David did something wrong, even though he's a great king, right? Mm-hmm. He's one of the most famous kings, Israelite kings in the Bible, you know, in Judaism and in Christianity. And so the right thing to do sometimes is to criticize, constructively criticize and say, or to push back against evil, you know. And so I think that is where we fall into a trap, is we want to be so one-sided with our support in some cases that we're either 100% anti or 100% for, and there's no middle ground. I think that's something she has got right, is that she's pushed back and she said, hey, we should not be afraid of bringing up critique when it's necessary. We should not have to fear that. And I think she probably personally faced a lot of that, where, you know, maybe I'm not accusing the Daily Wire. I'm not accusing Ben Shapiro. I like Ben Shapiro as far as I know what I know about him. So I'm not accusing him specifically, but I'm just saying, from the culture that she's been in general, maybe she's gotten some sort of, you know, she's felt that pressure or felt that fear, and she's expressed that. She said that, you know, that, you know, like, you know, she felt afraid for her life just criticizing Israel and stuff like that. And it's like, well, that should never be the case, right? You should be able to criticize without feeling fear, and whether that was real, you know, founded or not, you know, obviously it's something she experienced. But we should be able to look at Israel and Palestine and the Palestinians and the Jews through the lens of historical fact, current day facts, what's happening right now, but also like what are these both sides of this you know, this war, this fight, what do they claim, you know? And I think that when it gets down to it, whether it's Israel versus Iran or Israel versus Palestinians, whatever it is, it's I think one thing that she kind of ignores, and I like that she is willing to point out and say, hey, if she believes that genocide is taking place or something, she's willing to actually say those things. Now, whether those things are really taking place or not, I think we need to get to the bottom of it. We need to look at the actual facts and figure out what's the truth there. But at the same time, what she's ignoring is, what has the other side said that they want to do? And you know, in the case of Iran, it's not just what they've said, but it's what they do. They're one of the biggest funders of terrorism around the world. Hamas, you know, some of the things that Hamas did, if you go watch the videos, it's just insane. It's so atrocious. But here's the thing, that still doesn't justify Israel doing the wrong thing, you know. And I think that's where I kind of land, not in the middle. I'm definitely like more supportive of Israel, but a little bit more towards the center, because it's like, hey, we should be able to push back and say, hey, I support you, but I also support people in general and human rights, you know, across the board around the world, no matter who they are, you know, but I also support what's right, doing the right thing. And if you're doing the wrong thing, even if I like you and even if I support you, I'm going to push back and I'm going to criticize and say, stop doing the wrong thing and do the right thing. So that's my, you know, hopefully people can hear that. And, you know, what do you think, Doug?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that one of the things that, as far as what I've seen from her channel anyway, she has not really commented on the aggression toward Israel. And like you said, not that would justify any sort of heinous crimes, right? But at the same time, we do need to take into consideration all of the factors that are happening here. And I have a hard time believing that countries like Iran are just totally peaceful towards Israel and just are fine with them existing. I don't think that's the case. Right. When I talk about anti-Semitism, you can find it over there. They literally want the way that you can describe, or that you could possibly define anti-Semitism, is not believing in the right for Jews to exist, right? And that's literally exactly what some of these people are doing. So we need to talk about that, because that's not right. This is a huge problem. We shouldn't have that belief on any race or people group of any kind. Everybody has the right to exist. And so when we ignore that there are some countries who have this literally ingrained in their religion, in their politics, and that is what they're after, regardless of whether or not the people of that country are behind it, the leaders of the country are. And let's not forget the corruption that happens with leadership. Every single country is run by corrupt humans, and there's going to be some problems, and we need to talk about all of them and not just conveniently exclude those things. It is important. But at the same time, to her point, we should be able to do the same thing about Israel. Whatever corruption is happening there, we should also be able to talk about that without just being called an anti-Semite right out the gate. It does seem as though it's very difficult. Like, even going into this conversation, I was a little bit concerned because, like, I'm very pro-Israel. I just want to make that clear. Very pro-Israel. But I have criticisms, and I was a little concerned about some of the potential criticisms that I might have. Like, what's going to be the pushback on that? Who's going to call me an anti-Semite because I criticize Israel? You know, like, that's not a good place to be either. Like,
right.
Nobody should be under some sort of veil of fear because they have questions on people. It's only when that goes to violence that it should be addressed. And so, I don't know, I think I'm just rambling now, but that's basically my essential concept is she needs to, well, I shouldn't say what she needs to do. Her channel, her stuff, she does whatever she wants. But I would like to see more clarity on her position with those who are against Israel in a better light with more information involved.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'd like to see more clarity as well. And I think that's going to take the right people, her having the right people on, or somebody interviewing her, the right person interviewing her and having that conversation. So we'll see. Right. Obviously, she's probably never going to see this video, never going to respond to it, but you know, we can pray that she does. So see if we get a response. But anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this conversation. Obviously, I support Israel as well. I'm very supportive of Israel, not just on this channel, but my other channel as well. But at the same time, I'm in a place where I believe we should be allowed to openly criticize those that we support, or else guess what? We're not really supporting them because we're not really for their good, because you can't do the right thing without pushback. If you're just free to do whatever you want to do and nobody pushes back, nobody that you know cares about you pushes back, guess what? That's how you spoil a child. You know, that's how you raise a spoiled child, and you get somebody that has no moral bounds, you know, and just always gets what they want. It's like, that's not a good way to treat anybody in life, you know? So that would be my pushback and my criticism, would be like, hey, if we need to put pressure on Israel as the United States, or even as the Christian community or whatever, or whoever, conservatives or whatever, it's like we should be able to do that without fully rejecting support of them, while still supporting them and saying, hey, we want your good. We're doing this for your good because we support you, because we believe in Israel, and we believe in the rights of the Jews, but also the rights of everybody, like Doug said, the rights of everyone around the world to exist and to be able to live peacefully. So that's it. That's the show for today. Hopefully y'all let us know what you think. Anyways, yeah, let us know what you think below. If you hate this, if you love it, if you're kind of in the middle, that would be awesome to hear from y'all. So see y'all. Oh yeah, tomorrow we're going to be talking about Palantir, the company, Palantir. Am I saying it right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's gonna be a fun conversation. So y'all join us tomorrow. We're gonna have Ryan and Reese on as well, and we'll see you then.
Yeah.